I got lost in the corn maze during Maple Hollow's Harvest Festival. Fog rolled in fast, swallowing every path I remembered. My phone battery died. My friends' voices faded into nothing. Then a beam of light cut through the corn stalks. A stranger's hand reached for mine before I could speak. "I've got you," she said, like she'd known me forever. My whole group was still searching when she found me first. I didn't know yet that she'd change everything. My name is Riley Voss, 28. A park ranger from Burlington, Vermont, who came to Maple Hollow Farm for one weekend of pumpkin spice and quiet woods. Nothing more. I hadn't dated anyone seriously in 2 years. Not since a breakup convinced me love wasn't safe. Especially not for someone like me. Still half-closeted to my own family. Her name was Sawyer Callahan, the farm's maze guide. Wearing a flannel jacket dusted with hay and carrying a lantern like it was second nature to her. "You're the fourth lost tourist tonight," she teased, guiding me toward the exit with a grin that made the cold October air feel warmer. I laughed for the first time all week, surprised at how easy it felt talking to a woman I'd known for exactly 4 minutes. When we finally reached the gate, my friends Dana and Priya were frantic, but Sawyer just waved like this happened every night. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll show you the maze without getting you lost this time." I told myself it was just Vermont hospitality. Nothing more. Even as I memorized the shape of her smile, Dana raised an eyebrow at me in the truck. "You were gone 40 minutes with a stranger and you're blushing." I denied it, staring out the window at the farmhouse lights disappearing behind rows of dried corn stalks. The next morning I went back alone, telling myself it was for the apple cider donuts, not the girl with the lantern. Sawyer was waiting by the ticket booth, like she'd expected me, 2 donuts already in her hand. "I saved you the cinnamon one," she said, and something in my chest tilted sideways. We spent the whole afternoon walking the farm, and I forgot, for hours, to be careful with my heart. Sawyer showed me the barn where her family stored decades of harvest photographs, black and white faces smiling under the same maple trees. "My family's owned this land since 1952, she said proudly, though a flicker of something sad crossed her face when she said it. I asked why she stayed instead of leaving for the city, and she shrugged. "Some people are meant to grow things, not chase things." Her words stuck with me longer than they should have, considering I'd known her less than 24 hours. We texted that night, then the next. Our conversation stretching past midnight over nothing important and everything important at once. Dana noticed my phone buzzing constantly and smirked. "You've got the look, Riley. Don't pretend you don't." I extended my trip by 3 days, blaming it on research for a ranger conference, which nobody believed, least of all me. Sawyer taught me how to identify a good pumpkin by sound, tapping each one like it held a secret only farmers knew. "Hollow means ready," she said, tapping one gently. "Loud on the outside, but empty where it counts." I wondered if she was talking about pumpkins or about herself, and I didn't ask. Not yet. One evening we sat on hay bales watching the sunset bleed orange over the fields, saying nothing, needing nothing else. "I don't usually let guests stick around this long," she admitted, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I don't usually stay," I said back, and the silence after felt loaded with something neither of us named. Priya asked if something was going on between us, and I laughed it off, though my hands were shaking when I answered. That night, Sawyer showed me an old shoebox of letters from a childhood pen pal program called Farm Kids of America. "I wrote to some kid for 2 years and never learned her name," she said. "Just initials." My stomach dropped. Those were my initials too. And I'd written those exact letters as a lonely 10-year-old in Vermont. I didn't say anything yet, too stunned to trust the coincidence, but I kept the thought locked tight in my chest. We spent the next few days inseparable, and my ranger job started feeling very far away and very unimportant. Her mother, Ruth Callahan, watched us from the porch sometimes, her expression unreadable, like she was doing arithmetic in her head. Ruth doesn't trust easily, Sawyer warned me. Give her time. She's protective of this place. And of me. I promised I'd be patient, not realizing yet how much patience the coming weeks would actually demand from both of us. One rainy afternoon, stuck inside the farmhouse kitchen, Sawyer reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Neither of us moved for a long moment, the kettle whistling behind us, forgotten and ignored. I like you, Riley, she finally said, quiet but certain, like she'd rehearsed it 100 times in her head. I said it back before I could talk myself out of it, and something in me finally exhaled after 2 long years. We didn't kiss that day. Both of us too careful, too aware of small towns and long memories and watching windows. Instead we shook hands like it was a business deal, both laughing at how absurd and how right it felt. Dana packed her bags for Burlington without me. You're staying, she said. I've never seen you like this. I called my supervisor and asked for 2 more weeks of leave, blaming a family emergency that wasn't entirely a lie. Sawyer and I started spending mornings feeding goats and evenings walking the maze after closing, tracing the same paths again and again. This maze was my grandfather's idea, she told me one night. He said a good maze teaches you patience, not speed. I asked about her grandfather, and her face closed slightly. He died before I was born. Long story. Family stuff. I let it go, sensing a wound I wasn't ready to touch, though I filed the moment away carefully. Our first kiss happened by the pumpkin patch, under string lights, both of us laughing nervously right before it happened. It wasn't dramatic or perfect, just warm and a little clumsy, and somehow that made it feel more real. I've wanted to do that since the maze, Sawyer admitted, forehead resting against mine, cheeks flushed from more than cold. I told her I'd wanted it since the cinnamon donut, and she laughed loud enough to startle the goats. We became careful but undeniable, holding hands only when no one from town was around to see. Ruth started setting an extra plate at dinner without being asked, a small gesture that felt bigger than words. Don't hurt her, Ruth told me privately one evening, voice steady. She's given this farm everything. Don't be the thing that breaks her. Promised I wouldn't, meaning it fully. Not yet understanding how complicated that promise would become, Sawyer introduced me as her friend to the mail carrier, and I saw the flicker of hurt cross her own face at the word. That night I asked if she was scared of people knowing, and she admitted, quietly, that she was terrified. This town remembers everything, she said. My family's already survived one scandal. I don't want to be the next one. I didn't push. But the word scandal lodged itself in my mind, another piece of a puzzle I hadn't solved yet. We agreed to take things slow publicly. Even as privately we were already planning a future neither of us said out loud. 2 weeks later, my supervisor called demanding I return to Burlington or lose my ranger position permanently. I hadn't told Sawyer yet, dreading the conversation, knowing distance might be the thing that finally broke us. When I finally told her, she went quiet, staring at the fields instead of at me for a long time. So you're just leaving, she said flatly, and I hated how much that word just hurt to hear. I have to work something out, I said. I don't want to lose this. Any of it. She didn't respond, just walked back toward the barn, leaving me standing alone in the cold October air. That same week, a woman named Jenna Marsh arrived, introducing herself as Sawyer's old friend from agricultural college. Something about the way Jenna touched Sawyer's arm told me their history ran deeper than friendship ever had. We dated for a year, Sawyer admitted later, avoiding my eyes. It ended badly. She's here for a farming conference. That's all. I wanted to believe her, but doubt had already planted itself, quiet and stubborn, refusing to be pulled out. Jenna started appearing everywhere Sawyer was, offering help with the maze, the animals, the Harvest Festival Planning Committee. Dana warned me over the phone. Trust your gut. Riley. Something about this doesn't sit right. I confronted Sawyer. And she snapped. Exhausted from managing the farm. Her mother. And now my insecurity too. I can't keep reassuring you, she said. If you trusted me, you wouldn't need me to prove anything. We didn't speak for 3 days. The longest 3 days since the corn maze. Each one heavier than the last. During that silence, I finally opened the old shoebox of pen pal letters, comparing handwriting against a letter I'd kept since childhood. The handwriting matched perfectly. Sawyer had been my anonymous pen pal. RV. To her. See. To me. All those years ago. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, realizing we'd found each other twice, decades apart. Without either of us knowing, I drove to the farm to tell her, only to overhear Jenna saying something that stopped me cold at the barn door. You never really got over me, Jenna was saying. This ranger girl is just a distraction before you remember what we had. Sawyer's silence, from where I stood, sounded like agreement, and my chest caved in around the quiet. I left without saying anything, driving back to the inn with shaking hands and a heart I didn't recognize anymore. Sawyer called that night, but I let it ring. Unsure if I could survive hearing her voice explain nothing. The next morning, Ruth showed up at my door instead, surprising me with her presence and her unexpected gentleness. Jen is manipulative, Ruth said bluntly. Always has been. My daughter didn't say what you think you heard. I told her what I'd overheard. And Ruth sighed, sitting down heavily like the weight of old history had returned. This family has a habit of losing people to rumors, she said. I won't watch it happen again. She told me about my grandfather then. A name that stopped my breath entirely, Walter Voss, the farm's original owner. Your grandfather sold this land to my father in 1971, Ruth said. After a scandal drove him out of town. My hands went cold. I'd grown up hearing vague stories about a lost family farm, never knowing where or why. He loved a man named Thomas, Ruth said gently. Someone found out. The town turned on him. He had no choice but to leave. I sat in stunned silence, realizing the farm I'd fallen in love with once belonged to my own family's silenced history. Sawyer doesn't know the full story, Ruth admitted. I only kept it quiet to protect this family's peace, not to hide you from it. Everything suddenly connected. The pen pal letters, the land, the fear of scandal Sawyer carried without fully understanding why. I asked Ruth why she was telling me now, and she said simply, because history shouldn't repeat itself twice in one family. I left the Callahan house with more questions than answers, but one thing had become suddenly, painfully clear to me. Sawyer's fear of exposure wasn't only about herself. It was inherited, passed down like an old, unspoken family wound. I called my mother, Carol, needing to hear something familiar amid all these revelations shaking my sense of the past. Grandpa Walter, she said carefully, left because of something none of us were supposed to talk about. How did you find out? I told her everything, and there was a long pause on the line before she finally spoke again, voice trembling slightly. I loved a woman once too, my mother admitted. Her name was Frances. I chose safety instead. I've regretted it since. I sat on the porch steps, phone pressed to my ear, stunned by how much silence had shaped both generations before me. Don't do what I did, my mother said. Don't let fear write your story for you. You deserve better than regret. Her words cracked something open in me, a permission I hadn't realized I was still waiting for someone to give. I drove back to Maple Hollow that same afternoon, determined to face Sawyer honestly, whatever the outcome might be. I found her in the barn, surrounded by old harvest photographs, tears streaking dust across her cheeks. I heard what Jenna said, I told her. But I also heard what you didn't say back. Talk to me. Please. I told her to leave, Sawyer said quietly. I told her there was nothing left between us. You just didn't stay long enough to hear it. I apologized for running, for doubting her, for letting old fears speak louder than the trust we'd built together. She apologized too, for shutting me out during the hardest weeks, for carrying secrets she didn't know how to share. I showed her my grandfather's letter, the one Ruth had given me, proof of the history connecting our families. Sawyer read it twice, hands trembling. So this land was always supposed to find its way back to you somehow. Not the land, I said. Just me. Back to you. Quite. Apparently. If you count the pen pal letters. I pulled out my childhood letters, laying them beside hers. Initials matching. Handwriting matching. Decades of distance finally closing. Sawyer laughed through tears. I used to imagine what RV looked like. I never imagined it would be you. I used to write that I wanted a friend who understood quiet places, I said. Guess 10-year-old me knew something. We sat together in the barn for hours, piecing together a story neither of us had known we were already living. Jenna left the farm 2 days later. Quietly. After Ruth made it clear her presence was no longer welcome there. Sawyer and I agreed to stop hiding, at least from the people who mattered most, starting with our own families. I told Dana and Priya everything, and Dana just hugged me. Took you long enough, she said, grinning. Sawyer told Ruth first, who already knew. Then together we told the rest of Maple Hollow's small, watching community. Some neighbors offered quiet congratulations, others offered silence, and we learned to accept both without letting either define us. The town's annual harvest bonfire was approaching, the same event where, decades earlier, my grandfather's secret had been exposed publicly. Ruth worried the timing felt cruel, but Sawyer insisted we attend together, refusing to let old fear dictate the future again. This town owes your family an apology it never gave, Ruth said. Maybe it's time we stopped running from that night. I resigned from my ranger position in Burlington, accepting a transfer to a smaller Vermont post closer to Maple Hollow instead. My mother flew in for the bonfire, meeting Sawyer for the first time with tears already gathering in her eyes. You look like him, my mother told Sawyer's family gently. Walter. Around the eyes. Strange. Seeing him in someone else's face. The farmhouse buzzed with preparation. Hay bales stacked. String lights hung. The whole community gathering for the festival's final night. Sawyer seemed distracted all afternoon, checking the barn wiring twice, worry creasing her forehead in a way I couldn't ignore. Old building. Old wiring, she explained. We've been meaning to fix it. Just makes me nervous during bonfire season. I offered to help check the generator, but she waved me off, insisting the festival committee would handle inspections that evening. As dusk fell, townspeople gathered around the bonfire, the same field where my grandfather had once stood accused decades before. Ruth stood beside my mother, both women watching their children hold hands openly for the first time in public. Someone in the crowd murmured, and Sawyer's grip on my hand tightened, but neither of us let go this time. We're not hiding anymore, Sawyer said loudly enough for nearby neighbors to hear. Chin lifted, voice steady and clear. A ripple of quiet surprise moved through the crowd, followed slowly by a few scattered claps of support. I felt my grandfather's absence and presence at once, standing where his silence had once cost him everything he loved. The mayor, an old family friend of the Callahans, raised a glass. To honesty, he said. Long overdue in this town. For a moment, everything felt like it might actually be okay. The fear finally loosening its grip on both families. Then someone shouted from near the barn, and the crowd turned to see smoke curling upward into the dark sky. The wiring, Sawyer breathed, already running toward the barn where decades of harvest photographs and farm records were stored. I chased after her, panic sharpening every sense. the smoke thickening faster than any of us expected it could. "Sawyer!" "Wait!" I shouted, but she was already inside, pulling boxes of photographs toward the door, coughing hard. I followed her in, grabbing what I could, the heat pressing against my skin like a warning I ignored. "These are the only records," she gasped. "My grandfather's letters. Your grandfather's deed. Everything Ruth kept hidden for years." A support beam cracked overhead, and I grabbed her arm, hard, pulling her backward as debris crashed where she'd stood. "Leave it," I yelled. "The boxes don't matter. You matter. Please." "Sawyer. We have to go now." She hesitated one more second, grabbing a single small tin box before letting me drag her toward the door. We stumbled out together just as the barn's roof groaned and volunteers arrived with hoses to contain the flames. Ruth ran toward us, checking Sawyer's face frantically, relief and fury battling across her expression at once. "Never again," Ruth said, gripping her daughter's shoulders. "Not for photographs. Not for anything. Do you understand me?" Sawyer nodded, coughing, still clutching the small tin box against her chest like it held something irreplaceable. Later, once the fire was contained and the crowd had quieted, she finally opened the tin box in front of everyone. Inside were the original 1971 letters between Walter and Thomas, preserved carefully by someone who'd refused to let them burn. "My grandfather kept these," Sawyer said, voice shaking. "He never told anyone. He just kept them safe. All these years." Ruth read one letter aloud, her father's handwriting confirming he'd quietly disagreed with the town's treatment of Walter decades earlier. "He wanted to speak up," Ruth said. "He never did. I think that guilt is part of why he bought this land so carefully." The crowd around us had gone silent, listening to a 50-year-old story finally being told in its rightful place. My mother stepped forward, reading one line of Walter's handwriting aloud, her voice breaking on the final words. "He wrote that he hoped someday love wouldn't need to be a secret in this town anymore," she said softly. Someone in the crowd started clapping, quiet at first, then louder, until most of Maple Hollow stood applauding an apology decades overdue. Jenna's earlier interference suddenly felt small and distant, a minor storm compared to the history unfolding in front of everyone. Ruth pulled Sawyer and me both into a hug, smoke still clinging to our clothes, tears clinging to all our faces. "This land was always meant to hold your family and mine together," Ruth said. "We just took the long way here." The fire department confirmed the barn's damage was contained to one wall, sparing the harvest record stored deeper inside. We spent the rest of the night wrapped in blankets near the dying bonfire, townspeople offering coffee, apologies, and quiet acceptance. An elderly neighbor named Mr. Whitfield approached, admitting his own father had helped spread rumors about Walter back in 1971. "I'm sorry," he told me simply, 60 years late, "but I mean it. Your grandfather deserved better from all of us." I thanked him, surprised by how much lighter those simple words made decades of inherited family shame suddenly feel. Sawyer squeezed my hand, watching the last embers glow. "I think this is the ending my grandfather always wanted for us." "Not an ending," I corrected gently. "A beginning. One he helped make possible, even if he never got to see it." We stayed at the farm that winter, helping Ruth rebuild the damaged barn wall, restoring the old photographs, piece by piece. My mother visited often, forming an unexpected friendship with Ruth, two women finally free to speak about the past honestly. Sawyer and I framed the original 1971 letters and hung them inside the farmhouse, permanent, visible piece of both families' history. Slowly, the town's whispers faded into something quieter, gentler. The kind of acceptance that comes after enough honest conversations. I officially transferred to the local ranger station, splitting my days between the forest trails and Maple Hollow's rebuilt barn. Some old neighbors remained distant, and we learned to accept that not every wound heals on the same timeline. Dana and Priya visited for Thanksgiving, and Sawyer's easy laughter with them confirmed what I already quietly knew was true. "You found your person," Priya told me privately. "In a corn maze. Of all places. Grandpa Walter would be proud." Ruth started a small memorial garden near the barn, planting flowers beside a plaque honoring Walter and Thomas together. "Every visitor should know this land's real history," Ruth said. "Not just the harvest. The people who made it possible too." On the 1-year anniversary of the night we met, Sawyer led me back into the maze after closing hours. "I got lost here once," I reminded her, laughing, as she guided me deeper into the familiar rows of dried cornstalks. At the maze's center, string lights spelled out a question I hadn't expected, and my breath caught entirely. "Marry me," Sawyer said simply. No elaborate speech, just her steady voice and the lantern light between us. I said yes before she'd even finished pulling the small ring from her jacket pocket. Laughing and crying at once, Ruth and my mother were waiting near the farmhouse, unsurprised, having clearly helped plan the entire thing together. The whole town gathered the following spring. Maple Hollow's fields blooming green again. Our families finally, fully, unmistakably one. I once got lost in a corn maze and found the rest of my life waiting just past the fog. Some maps lead you home. Ours just took 2 families and 50 years to finally read correctly. Then